This week on Democratica.
В Соединенных Штатах теперь.
But I don't know him well.
Does that sound like a lie to you?
But I don't know him well.
That's a bad lie.
I want nothing. I want nothing.
But not until after it came out that the president was withholding the freaking aid.
But I don't know him well.
But if you just keep repeating the word hearsay, hearsay, hearsay.
Украину обвиняют.
That's cool. Pass the gravy.
But I don't know him well.
All that and more coming up. From the stash of presidential get-out-of-jail-free cards in Mitch McConnell's backyard, you're listening to Democratica, the political podcast for anyone who wants to understand the news without needing to start their annual physical 3 months in advance. You're AJ Johnson.
You are Stuart Max.
I'm a 13-year political veteran and a Capitol Hill insider, the founder of the OD Action newsletter and network.
And I'm a writer, performer, and cable news recluse.
Yes, you are. Well, welcome back to news.
Do people have their annual physicals in February or March? Is that a thing?
You can schedule your physical anytime you want.
Yeah, I thought so.
But sometimes you just get a 3-month head start and you just go to the hospital and take some tests. Actually, after this, I'm going to go do half my physical because that's what people do.
It is?
Nobody does that.
Okay, Stuart.
Except for Donald J. Trump, who last weekend
Did a half a physical?
Seems like a nice guy, though.
he went to Walter Reed Medical Hospital just to get a head start on his physical. He had some time to kill, so he got some tests done, part of his physical, which is scheduled for February.
Oh, no.
Does that sound like a lie to you?
Yes, it does.
It is absolutely a lie. Not only is there absolutely no reason to do part of your 2020 physical in 2019.
You can't, can you?
Well, it wouldn't really be a 2020
If-
physical anymore, would
yeah.
it? All of the things that he reportedly did at Walter Reed, guess where they can do them? The White House.
This is kind of a thing you're giving me with. It's new.
So the president went to Walter Reed unannounced. The word from the White House is that he had a light weekend, and so they got a head start on his annual physical.
So before
which is
we move
scheduled for mid-February.
Before we move forward, I want to reiterate again that his helpers or handlers, assistants, all sound like idiots. I really kind of think he is, but what kind of excuse? He wanted to get a jump start on his physical.
It's not, honestly, it's not even that they're idiots. It's that
That's a bad lie.
What's a good lie? The problem is that they are constantly needing to defend the indefensible. There's nothing wrong with the president needing to go to the hospital.
No.
But they're so used to lying, they're just going to throw it out there. And because they get away with it, it doesn't matter that it's a completely absurd lie. To make things even more ridiculous, White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham had this to say. She said, "I've given plenty of on-the-record statements that are truthful and accurate. In other words, sometimes I've told
they
the truth."
weren't, and sometimes they weren't truthful or accurate.
Exactly. And there is a proud history from Woodrow Wilson to Josiah Bartlett of lying about your physical.
That made me so, that made me happy.
I know.
If you don't know me,
He
you
loves
don't.
Woodrow Wilson.
Ha ha.
Yeah, the good news, though, is that your annual physical, and I assume the president's as well, will be completely free thanks to the Affordable Care Act. So thanks, Obama.
Thanks, Obama.
What are you thinking about this week, AJ?
So much.
Mm.
So I saw in the OD Action newsletter,
Mm-hmm.
there's a meme. I
Sure.
don't know what the kids are calling them these days, about Ronald Reagan.
kid.
Both, because we think of Reagan as lowering taxes, but the meme is about Reagan both lowering and raising taxes.
Yeah, more feedback on that meme than any meme we've ever shared in the newsletter. And it said essentially that if you're wondering why Social Security income is taxable, it's because after Ronald Reagan slashed taxes on the highest income from 70% to 28%, he made up for some of that shortfall by making 50% of Social Security benefits taxable. What Ronald Reagan did was changed the way that the United States brings in revenue and allocates revenue. I mean, he dramatically cut taxes on the wealthy, and he changed some of the incentives that are in place. So in 1981, he made his first large tax cut from about 70% on the highest income to about 50%. Now, it's really important to remember this is a marginal tax rate. So if the highest tax rate is $400,000 for a couple, you don't pay that high tax rate on anything under $400,000.
So it started at what and ended at what?
It started at 70
70%.
and it ended at 28.
And the only way they were ever going to make up that shortfall would have to be to raise it for someone else.
Well, I don't want to say that they're the only way, but certain Social Security benefits became taxable. Another thing that happened is that there was eliminations of tax deductions that you could take for certain investments that you made into your business. So gradually, over the course of his 8-year presidency, incentives shifted from invest back into your business, but it created a huge deficit. And Reagan paid for those tax cuts on the wealthy in 3 ways. One, as we said, he raised taxes on Social Security benefits and in other areas. 2, the national debt tripled over the course of Ronald Reagan's presidency. And 3, cutting funding for a lot of vital things. And I'm a big believer that for all of the praise that Ronald Reagan gets, that we are still suffering from Reaganomics. I'll give you just one example. I think we can all agree that college costs are out of this world. 2 things that Ronald Reagan did: cut tuition assistance by 25% just in his first term. Also slashed billions from research funding. And so if you're a university and you get your notoriety from the research that you're doing and your funding gets cut, you can't stop doing that research. You need to keep doing that research. So how are you going to fund it? By raising tuition at the same time that tuition assistance has been slashed.
I want you to know why that was effective for me. I'm sitting across from you, loaded down with massive college debt. What you just told me was a horror story, and I know who to blame for it.
It's a horror story that is incredibly common.
It's amazing how much shame it used to bring. It's not a source of pride, but at least it's a source of strength and community. Like, we all thought we had to go to college, and
well, it's something that every candidate for president next year
is going to be talking about,
except for one.
Well,
the current incumbent. But we have a lot of better choices.
I do have a question, or questions, I should say, about impeachment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's going on, isn't it?
Well, maybe. I think maybe it's wrapped,
I've
actually.
eaten so much popcorn this week.
So you watched it. I'm going to be honest with you. This is one of the ones I would have loved to have watched, but at work.
I devoured it.
I could. You would have stayed home you'd have called in sick if you had to.
If I had to, yeah.
I want to know where we are. I listened to a little bit. I saw what seemed like a great man get smeared.
There were a lot of people that testified. The immigrant, you're talking about Lieutenant Colonel Vindman,
yes,
was smeared by the president pretty viciously, despite being a war hero with an impeccable record of integrity and
How do you make
service.
Patriotism?
The other type of people who were smeared by the president were women. He pretty much left alone as I hardly know the man.
I don't know him very well. I have not spoken to him much. This is not a man I know well.
For the American-born men, and in grand Trumpian fashion, went after viciously the women who testified and the immigrant who testified.
Immigrants and women.
Yeah.
Oh, what's new?
So I think that if you aren't a political junkie, you might not have enjoyed it like I do. It would not have made a good legal drama, because every single witness came forward and systematically explained how the president conspired with Rudy Giuliani and a few cronies to avoid the appropriate channels to pursue objectives that were not only politically and personally motivated, but sabotaged and set back U.S. interests. And that includes, by the way, Republican witnesses. Special Envoy Volker testified that the investigation into the Bidens' supposed corruption was total baloney. Volker testified that Trump hated Ukraine and was not interested in helping. Volker testified Trump went around the established channels to pursue his own objectives. Tim Morrison, former White House national security aide, confirmed that there was a quid pro quo. These are Republican witnesses. Gordon Sondland, who is a Trump mega donor, confirmed that everyone was in the loop. And by everyone, he means Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, John Bolton, who was the national security advisor at the time, and Vice President Mike Pence. Gordon Sondland also testified, "We followed the president's orders." These are the Republican witnesses who are saying these things. On the other side, you had witnesses of, pardon the pun, unimpeachable character.
You knew it was going to come.
Somebody had to be unimpeachable in all this. Coming forward, despite risking their careers, risking their personal safety, risking their livelihoods. And they said they were doing so not just because they had a legal obligation, but a moral obligation. On the one hand, these witnesses confirmed what we already knew, because the President of the United States and his chief of staff, we've talked about this, they admitted it.
Yeah, I was going to say they confirmed it first, right?
I mean, even that's what's kind of so shocking about these public hearings is we knew so much. We had a doctored transcript that the president doctored and released of a call between the President of the United States and President Zelensky of Ukraine, where the president said, I need you to do me a favor, though, and then asked for investigations into political rivals. And then his chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, held a press conference and said,
Yep, we did this.
We did this.
Get
we
over
withheld
it.
money. Get over it. We did it for political reasons. That's what we do. Despite that, we have so many details, and every single Republican argument has been systematically debunked. We talked last week about how the Republicans had to pivot because their argument that Trump was going after corruption had been debunked. It was clear that Trump was going after the Bidens for political reasons. Now, so many of their defenses have been debunked that they're just repeating the defenses. They have nothing left. It got so bad for them that in the last day, the witness was the NSA's former top Ukraine and Russia expert, Fiona Hill. When Republicans, it was their turn to question her, they just monologued to the point where she said, do you want to ask me a question?
She actually said that.
They were afraid to ask her questions because when they gave her a chance to speak, it did not go well.
Could I actually say something? Because we've had three.
Doctor, I was going to ask you if you'd like to respond. There have been a number. Gentleman suspended. Dr. Hill, you may respond.
No, I think that what Dr. Wenstrup said was very powerful about the importance of overcoming hatred and certainly partisan division. And it's unfortunate that Congressmen Turner and Ratcliffe have both left as well, because I think all of us who came here under a legal obligation also felt we had a moral obligation to do so. We came as fact witnesses.
So here are some of the arguments that Republicans have been making. It was all hearsay. This whole impeachment is built on hearsay. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't make...
Forgetting the fact that Donald Trump admitted it and Mick Mulvaney admitted it, you had 3 people who were listening to his July 25th call with President Zelensky of Ukraine. You had Gordon Sondland, who spoke to the president by phone and testified that Trump was not interested in Ukraine and only interested in big stuff, in quotes, like the Bidens, he said. You had David Holmes, who was a U.S. Embassy in Ukraine official who overheard that call and testified with great detail. So the idea that this is built exclusively on hearsay, when you've got
that doesn't sound like any hearsay. I mean, I'm waiting to see
5 eyewitnesses. Yeah.
Those are witnesses.
It's about as far from hearsay as you could be.
But if you just keep repeating the word hearsay, 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 it'll make someone think that that's a valid argument.
Well, that's right. I think that is the strategy at this point because there's not much left. Real fast. So other defenses. Trump was interested in corruption. This wasn't about politics. Witness after witness has said, no, that is not the case. Also, the president had notes for his conversation with Zelensky that detailed corruption and fighting corruption. Donald Trump ignored those notes, pushed them aside, did not mention the things in those notes in order to talk about Joe Biden, his son, Burisma, the 2016 election. Another argument that the Republicans are making, we talked about this a little bit last week, how could it be quid pro quo when the Ukrainians got the aid without delivering anything that the president was asking for?
But not until after it came out that the president was withholding the freaking aid.
Exactly. It came 2 days after the investigation started in the House. Another thing that Republicans are latching onto is that when Gordon Sondland asked Trump specifically, what do you want from Ukraine? Trump said, I want nothing. I want nothing. No quid pro quo.
But here's my response. Now, if you weren't fake news, you'd cover it properly. I say to the ambassador in response, I want nothing. I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo. Tell Zelensky, President Zelensky, to do the right thing. So here's my answer. I want nothing. I want nothing.
This is something that Trump shouted a lot this past week at press conferences. And there's actually a really great picture of the notes that he has where he's got written out in Sharpie in big block letters, I want nothing, no quid pro quo.
Those are his notes?
As if it wasn't written down, he would say, I extorted them. I was using them for political gain. People died. Which is true. That also happened after the president was aware that the House was investigating. Again, you got caught with your hand in the cookie jar. It doesn't matter if you ate the cookies or not at that point.
That's a great way of putting it. Like a 7-year-old.
Well, to all of our 7-year-old listeners, you should go play outside.
No, I was thinking.
But that one's for you. David Holmes testified that he overheard Gordon Sondland talking by cell phone in a restaurant with the President of the United States, where Gordon Sondland had to pull the phone away from his ear because the president was shouting so loudly. Holmes overheard things the president was saying.
Are you kidding?
And Donald Trump says, Donald Trump has outstanding hearing, he would like us to know, and he has never been able to overhear the other end of a phone call.
What?
When you call me on the phone, my daughter yells AJ because
yeah.
my 2-year-old daughter can hear.
Can overhear.
Can recognize the sound of your voice, which is distinct and lovely. You should have a podcast. But here's the real thing that came out of the hearings that I think is worth noting. On the final day, Fiona Hill, who again was the former top Russia advisor in the White House, made very clear if you were perpetuating conspiracy theories that Ukraine had something to do with election interference in 2016 or that Joe Biden's son was somehow corrupt, then you are perpetuating Russia's narrative, that you are doing exactly what Vladimir Putin wants you to do. And Vladimir Putin actually said, thank God no one is accusing us of interfering with U.S. elections anymore. Now they're accusing Ukraine.
В Соединенных Штатах теперь Украину обвиняют.
So, in this final day of testimony, Fiona Hill made very clear that this was no longer just about the President of the United States. This was about an entire party in Congress doing the bidding of Russia to cover up crimes against the United States of America. If the cover-up is worse than the crime, then we have bigger problems right now than just the President of the United States. And that is, I think, what shifted more than anything else, because right now, there's only one jury in the country that wouldn't convict Donald Trump in about 20 minutes.
The Senate.
It happens to be Mitch McConnell's Senate. It's Thanksgiving week.
It is, yeah. It's Thanksgiving again.
So let's do a little different call to action this week.
Again?
It seems like it was just Thanksgiving last year.
I just keep thinking about all those poor turkeys. This is coming from a vegetarian.
Poor, delicious turkeys. Our call to action this week is going to be a little bit different because what we want to do is not break up our families or ruin Thanksgiving dinner, but we also don't want to sacrifice our values either. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to do those things and keep our souls intact.
You and I always talk about civil discourse. How do we get back to talking and not destroying? There are 3 things we can keep in mind and moving forward at these dinners. And it's 1, how we listen. 2, how we talk. And 3, how we move forward together.
How do we do that?
How do we listen? Everyone thinks they know what that means, and very few people do, or if they do, they don't do it.
It means I'm actively thinking about how to shoot you down while you're talking to me.
Oh, dark joke. Dark Thanksgiving joke.
Too soon.
Yeah. Actively means we seek first to understand. If you are actively listening to another person during a conversation, you can, once they're finished, instead of you moving on to your next point, you can tell them what they just said. Maybe not word for word, but you can tell them what they just said.
So if I'm truly listening to you, I can repeat back to you the essence of what you just said.
Nice work. You get a gold star, Stuart.
Yes.
So that's how we listen.
Step 1.
Yes. That's how we listen. How do we talk? This is a thing that I've said it to you many times, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. One of my favorite quotes of the Buddha is that he said that all right speech must be beneficial, meaning that things that we say must be of benefit not only to ourselves, but to other people. There's an even simpler way to say it. Talk to the other person. Whoever you're with, talk to them. Don't talk to Fox News. Don't talk to the person you're trying to impress. Don't talk to rage or fear. Talk to that person. If someone's talking to you and you're a vegetarian, if they go on and on and on about meat and hunting and killing and blood, they're probably not going to reach you very deeply. They're not going to get you on a gut level. But if we make sure that when we're talking to the other person, we're talking to them, not around them, not through them, we're not using them, but we're simply speaking to them, wanting them to hear our words, taking responsibility for our communication, it can be good.
What I would say to Mitch McConnell is I would take in whatever kind of healthcare pushback or impeachment pushback, anything, no matter how ridiculous it would sound. And I would explain that's not my value set. My values are such that it is worth fighting to get everybody healthcare. And your values might be different, and that's okay. We don't necessarily have to disagree on facts, but I'm going to keep fighting to get people healthcare. That's cool. Pass the gravy.
Perfect. You took us to the third point. How do we move forward together? It is, and this is...
Is it about the gravy?
It's, well, we share our gravy.
Sure.
And that's not a euphemism for anything. We actually share it.
Yet.
Yet. But how do we move forward together? We accept.
Mm-hmm.
It is sometimes the only common ground you can find with another person is to say, you are a person and I am a person. I have the right to my beliefs and you have the right to yours. It is not disrespecting the other person, not to respect their beliefs.
Right.
To remember they have the right to those beliefs is not to validate them. It's not to say that they're mine. It's not to need to agree. The point of all of this is at these dinners, we don't all have to agree. We have to listen. We have to talk. And we got to not fight.
And we have to get through a meal.
It's one meal. We could do this.
Right.
And I know we're making jokes, but in microcosm, think about your dinner. No matter how much you shout, do you think you're really going to get across the other person? And is everybody at your dinner going to enjoy it?
Moment of uplift. Moment of uplift.
I got to stop smoking and I could get the higher note.
No, you sound good.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm proud of myself. What you got for me? I actually don't know this moment of uplift, so it better be good.
So here's a moment of uplift that hits fairly close to home. So at my alma mater Syracuse University, in the last several years, especially in the last several weeks, actually, there's been a lot of bigoted graffiti and defacing property. There's also been harassment of students on racial grounds. It's become a real endemic problem at Syracuse. And there it is. That's your moment of uplift.
There it is. We're making America great again.
And students weren't going to take it anymore. They began...
I like it already.
Some student activists began a Not Again SU movement. And they delivered a set of 19 demands to Chancellor Syverud of Syracuse, who was not there when I was there. And they gave him 1 week to sign them. Over the course of that, they had sit-ins, sleep-ins, a lot of non-violent resistance that has historically brought about change in this country and around the world. And he didn't sign it. They called for him to resign, and they got more intense, and he made 3 edits, and he signed them. And so they got pretty close to what they wanted, and they're not done because this happened under his watch. They're continuing to call for law enforcement at the university to resign. They have already begun to bring about change, and they clearly understand that the work is never done, and they're not backing down, and they won't back down until this problem goes away. And I'm so inspired by that, especially coming from a guy who was there at 18, 19, 20 years old and was a total idiot. And to see these young people take things into their own hands and getting into good trouble and bringing about change in a nonviolence way.
I like that, getting into good trouble. I like that a lot.
I can't take credit. That would be John Lewis.
Oh.
Well, I don't know if he can. He says it a lot. He certainly did it a lot. But yeah, it's a bit of a catchphrase for the great congressman and civil rights icon John Lewis.
I feel that's okay. So, but wait. I'm inspired, but I'm confused, Stuart. These students took action and brought about change. How many of them were armed, to your knowledge?
As to my knowledge, 0 were armed.
Were there any fights? Was there any aggression? I mean, was there yelling? How much violence was there in the process of this change coming?
There is no violence that I'm aware of. There was probably yelling. Actually, there were some really eloquent speeches. When I say I was an idiot in college and these young people inspire me, I mean in every way.
I want to put something up on the website.
We'll put some videos of these students taking things into their own hands.
Because I want to see this.
It's a true inspiration. Yeah, and you shall.
I cannot imagine. I'm smiling now just at the thought of watching change come.
Check out odaction.com/democratica. Check out these videos. Have an awesome Thanksgiving week.
Please
and
be
we'll
nice
talk
to each
at you
other
next week. Absolutely. Keep fighting the good fight, AJ.
You too, Stuart Max.
Democratica is produced by Sam Graber and engineered by Mark Charles, with support from Fifi Sun, recorded at the Ramshackler Room with music from Mike Michael. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Democratica on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, whatever podcast app you like to use. You don't want to miss an episode, and we'd miss you if you did. So please subscribe, and while you're there, leave us a 5-star review.